Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
Most unique show on radio. The show dedicated to making you a success. If you want to find success, just follow the mouse, says our guest, Mike Goldsby. Mike, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be on.
Now, Mike, you're an entrepreneurship professor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that in itself, I think, is fantastic for our show because, you know, we hear people specializing in history and English and, you know, maybe accounting and marketing. But now we're really talking about entrepreneurship, and that's what we're about. People who want to be successful, either in their own businesses, etc. But you have a unique specialty. So would you tell us what that is?
Yeah, sure. My specialty is bridging the history and the current practices of the Walt Disney Company into the student's education.
And as I said to you before the show, you probably have, at least in my opinion, one of the greatest jobs in the world. Next to the Good Humor Man and the Carvel who sells ice cream, this has to be great. And if I understand it correctly, you've actually read just about everything that's out there on Walt Disney. Did I read that correctly?
I would say every book that's ever been published on Walt Disney or Disney, I have. Yes, so I have an extensive library on Disney.
So if I'm ever on a quiz show, I want you on my side or my, what do they call it, the hotline when I can reach out to one other person?
I'll be your phone a friend person.
Phone a friend, I like that. And basically having a class, do you relate the Disney experience or do you talk about Walt's history or what is an actual class like?
Oh, both. The reason we talk about Walt, the person, is because he came from such humble upbringings, and the impact he and his company have made in the world shows what's possible in a free market system. So, one, we want to give them that history so they know what's possible, and then now, long after Walt died, we want them to see what makes the current company so successful because, as I always like to point out to the students, and we take them behind the scenes and we have them meet the management and they get to see how everything works. And I point out to them that if that 42 square mile piece of property can leave that many people so happy, then why can't smaller organizations with much less things to keep an eye on do the same?
And I have to say, just as a personal comment, not only do I think it's a wonderful idea, and just as you said, why can't a dentist office, a simple vitamin store, a men's clothing shop, a bookstore do the same thing? If we can come out that happy, and you and I were talking before the show, and I said to you truthfully, when I go on a Disney vacation, it's a vacation. It really is. And I don't think I can come home and have one fair complaint where other places I'll say, gee, this wasn't good, or I didn't like the way they ran that, or something wasn't clean. But it's really an amazing experience. What is the feedback you get from the students after the class is over?
Well, one I get is that it totally, it changes their view of Disney. They really appreciate it even more. Most of the kids have gone before, but now they see it in a whole new light. But the other thing, as you'd mentioned about coming back home, is now they've got that mindset, and they use that on what they see in their own world around them. And what's the neatest thing is that kids that have graduated and they've gone on to have careers and they've been gone for 7, 8, 10 years say that was the best experience they had in their college career.
Oh, I would think easily, and I think we all want to apply to be an intern for you, or a teacher's aide, or a graduate assistant, or something, whatever the position is called, and maybe we'll even pay you, but never mind we're looking for pay or anything else, because students actually get to go to Disney World and experience this. Am I correct?
That is correct, and that's a good point. We also have grad assistants who go down there and help us organize those students. So if you're looking for an MBA program, consider Ball State.
and again, I can't rave enough about it. When I saw this book, and we're talking about your book, is called Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. It's by our guest, Michael Goldsby, Goldsby. He's a professor at Ball State, and it's for people who like Disney, or people who want to know more about it, or they're thinking where they should go. And this is not a paid commercial in any way, but it's just a reflection of the experience I've had, and obviously what you've had, and an enjoyment that you've had through life. Now, Walt seemed to have all the trappings from what I read in your book and what I've read before that, and during my past studies of Disney. He seemed to have all the trappings of a failure in life. And can you tell our audience something about his background?
Sure. Yeah, when he was in Kansas City, he started up some animation businesses that totally failed. I mean, he went bankrupt, and he was living in his office for a while. Then actually he was basically homeless at the end of his time in Kansas City. And it's really a great story of serendipity that Walt went broke, and then he moved out to Hollywood where his uncle was living and decided to try to take a chance out there. And as it happened, his brother Roy, who ended up being the major reason that Walt became successful later with the company, was rehabilitating from, I think it was tuberculosis, from World War I service, and he was in Hollywood at a "You help me," and Roy said, "Well, I don't have anything else going on. Sure, I'll help you." Now think about this. If Roy had not had that illness and he had been living his life out as a banker in Kansas City, Walt would not have had him to help him handle the financial side for the rest of the history of that company. It's just an incredible series of events. But to Walt's credit, as I point out in the book, to Walt's credit, he did move out to Hollywood to where his best opportunity was. I mean, at a young age, he had $40 in his pocket. And Walt, being the type of dreamer he is, bought a first-class ticket on a train and went out there, and he and Roy started from scratch and built that animation business.
And again, I'm taking it from your book, but as I read about his father, he seemed to be kind of a good, hardworking, dour man who just didn't succeed too much in life. Would that be a good summary?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mentioned that in the opening of the book that when you go to Disneyland, there's a window of people that are legends or people who are given special appreciation by the company and by Walt. And he put his father first and foremost on Main Street, USA at Disneyland. And I think part of that was that Walt grew up under an entrepreneur. His dad was a serial entrepreneur, but his father also usually failed at those businesses. But I think, Walt kind of got a little internship, seeing what his dad went through, and I think that sort of nurtured that entrepreneurial spirit in him.
Mike, at this point in the show, we just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Today we're talking about the book Entrepreneurship the Disney Way with its author, Michael Goldsby. And Michael, would you tell us where we can get the book and if there's a website where we can learn more?
Sure. Yeah, so you can find it on Amazon. It's for purchase on Amazon. And also our website, if you want to know more about us, my co-author Rob Matthews and myself, we have a website that is www.elprofile.com. So that's elprofile.com.
And singular profile, and we'll give that information again later in the show if people are interested in this, and I think they should be, because first of all, it's a wonderful book. You give a little bit of the background of the history of Disney, how Walt grew up, what his father was like, living conditions that they were under, and as I said, a lot of us, if we have a failure, we kind of give up. I'm not cut out for this. I'll never succeed. I won't be a great salesman or an accountant. And between Walt's father and Walt, they had every reason to give up and just figure this isn't for me and be a good employee for someone because it just didn't seem to connect. And if I'm right, didn't Walt go bankrupt several times?
Yes, he did. And again, that's where I think Roy coming into the picture changed everything, because Roy was really good with the finances. He was actually really good with the people inside the company. People really liked Roy. So you had Walt being the dreamer and the visionary, and you had Roy figuring out ways to get the money. And Roy's kind of the unsung hero of the company, as well as his wife, Lillian, who actually started in the company. Walt met his wife. She was actually an incompetent woman in the company. And so she understood what went into the business. And actually, Roy and Lillian Walt's wife, oftentimes would work together to try to steer Walt in the direction that they thought might be good for the company.
And I think, as you said, I was just about to say, it's called Walt Disney World. And I think somewhere along the way they changed it. Wasn't it Disney Brothers or Disney Family or something like that originally?
Originally, it was called the Disney Brothers Studio, correct? And then Walt had it changed to Walt Disney Studios, and then later Walt Disney Productions, and then the company later turned it into Walt Disney Company. And
that seems like in most families it would be enough that unless Roy got a considerable raise out of that, or more stock, or some side benefit, I think it would have been a bit annoying. Not that Walt certainly didn't do amazing things and was a visionary, but as you said, if Roy wasn't there with the money, who knows how this would have worked out, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's the difference between Kansas City and Hollywood, for sure.
Now, you mentioned in your book that there are 4 types of entrepreneurs. Would you tell us what are the types and which one was Walt?
Sure. So we say there's 4 types of entrepreneurs. There are artists who like to work in big ideas and are very expressive and really work on the craftsmanship of the business. Then you've got the scientists who are really into engineering and technology and the details and the facts of a business. Then you've got builders who like to scale and leverage what they have and really try to do things big. And then you have evangelists who are the type who try to sell the mission to the rest of the world. They're out there out front trying to get people excited about the company. So what the book, actually, the first 4 chapters, explain how Walt passed through all 4 types of entrepreneurship as he built that company. When it was a little animation company, he was actually doing a lot of the drawing in the early days. He got away from that after a few years. But what that meant was he understood what went into good animation. He knew what went into what had to be done to make cartoons. And then what is amazing about Walt's progress into the scientist stage, and the company still does this, really where he really improved the art was by bringing in the latest technologies, sound, color, new cameras. And from there, then it was about scaling it into more of a bigger type of studio. And that's when he started getting into movies and he started getting into Snow White and bigger productions. And then eventually TV comes along and Disneyland, and he's out there in the public. And then that's when he's an evangelist. So I think at Walt's heart, he was very much an artist. I think in his heart, he was very much an artist. But to grow the company, which was his ambition, was to make that company really impactful in the world, he went through all 4 stages, and in the process hired the best people that represented each type of entrepreneurship.
Now, when he did this, again, he started out as a cartoonist, and in that age, I'm taking it from your book, and as I remember a little bit, but today we can see wonderful theater, movies, and productions with cartoons, but then cartoons was kind of like comic books, right? I mean, it was right. Kind of a small extra that they would put on with the theater, maybe get the kids in, stuff like that.
That's right. And what's interesting is that's where Walt was trying to up the quality of the way people saw cartoons. And something that, as I mentioned, in his heart, he was an artist. His hero growing up was Charlie Chaplin. So they said as a child, he could mimic Charlie Chaplin to a T. And then later, whenever you watch those early Disney cartoons or those early Disney movies, they say that basically what you're seeing is Walt Disney. And in fact, for many years, Walt Disney was even the voice of Mickey Mouse. So Walt and Mickey are very intertwined. And Walt wanted to bring respect and bring admiration. And that's where a cartoon series later called The Silly Symphonies totally changed the way people looked at animation.
Mike, at this point in the show, we want to find out certainly more about Walt Disney and what made his business so great and him such a legend, both in his time and after his time. But at this point in the show, we're going to let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Today we're talking to Mike Goldsby, and we'll be back after this break.
So this year, I ordered my prom dress from Shady Deals, and when it came, it said, some assembly required.
I ordered these batteries for my digital camera, but the batteries weren't included, so I had to draw all of our family memories.
I ordered a 60-inch TV from Shady Deals. What they actually meant is, you can't sit further than 60 inches away.
Be a savvy consumer. Research businesses, report false advertising, and settle transaction claims with the BBB.
Test your advertising IQ. Go to bbbadtruth.org.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today we're talking to Mike Goldsby, author of Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. Mike, you go through many, formulas or lessons in your book that you learned from Disney. And can you take us through, first of all, Disney lesson number 1, how unique circumstances play a role in life?
Yeah, so again, that was the story I was telling you about Walt Disney going through bankruptcy and then moving out to California, and by the sheer act of moving forward and finding the upside. That's one thing we talked about earlier about great entrepreneurs and successful people. Even going through hard times, they always look for that upside. They look for the next opportunity. They don't quit. Walt never quit. And when he went out to California and had these great circumstances of his brother who had 8 years banking experience, living with an uncle who could help him have a place to get by and survive while he was working on the animation business, and being in Hollywood in the 20s during the boom time when production of animation, production of movies went from New York City out to Hollywood, California. So it was a really good set of circumstances that Walt, 1, put himself into, and then 2, took advantage of.
And I guess, when people say have perseverance or hang in there, he really did, because, again, people maybe not have heard in the first part of our show, he really wasn't much of a success. Everything he did seemed to kind of fall flat. Even if it worked out, he didn't make much money on it, and he put in a lot of work, and he was a very, very hard worker and almost, certainly passionate and almost obsessive. Would that be a good description?
Totally. And in fact, I think, when you look at these very, very successful entrepreneurs, I even mentioned that they might have a certain wiring that's almost manic, right? They have an engine that just never stops. I think we've all got the chance to be successful. But Walt was always working on the business. He was always thinking about the business. All his travels were tied into the business. And so, yeah, his entire life was a lot of work, a lot of stress. He went through betrayals. He went through hard times, but he just kept pressing forward. And eventually, he got rewarded for that when TV came on, and he had new avenues to really put that Walt Disney name out there in front of more people.
Do you think he ever envisioned what his work would become?
I don't think so. I think with Walt, there's this Gallup Strengths Finder, and maybe some of your listeners have taken that. And I think the number one thing that Walt was a learner. I think when Walt would finish a project, he never repeated it. He always went on to the next thing. And so I don't know that he knew exactly what he would have done 20, 30 years down the line, but I can tell you that whatever would have been cutting edge at that moment, he would have been really looking into it, and he would have been thinking about how can we bring that into the Walt Disney Company.
Now, you mentioned another lesson. You say, I think it's lesson number 2, be honest about what works and what does not work. Isn't that obvious, or can you tell us how you mean that in the sense of Walt Disney's work and what he does?
Exactly. So I think we all approach our work differently. We've all, there are practices of success, there are best practices at work, but we've all got different personalities, we've all got different goals, we've got different dreams. And so I think you need to be honest with yourself about what works for you, and then being honest to others about what works for you as well. And, I think we can learn from others, but then at the same time we have to be authentic and true to who we are and how we build our enterprises. And that's really the neat thing about entrepreneurship is there are many different ways that you can build a different type of business in the same industry.
And when Walt was going through this, did he, today we're famous, I guess, for consultants, outsiders coming in, people reviewing it. Other than the people who would buy his cartoons and movies and serve as the financiers for it, did he have any consultants or people saying to him, maybe the trends are showing this way? I mean, we all look for the metrics of anything now. The future is going to be in cartoons or movies or anything. Did he have anyone like that helping him?
I would say that it was more about Walt going with his instincts and his intuition into certain industries. But as he went into these new industries, he would bring in experts. So Walt, he would get a vision in his head, but he was willing to tweak that vision. When the consultants that he hired, one in particular was called the Stanford Research Institute, and a guy named Buzz Price, who did hundreds of surveys and economic analyses for him. Whenever he was getting ready to move into something, he would send Buzz Price out and with a number of people, or he would talk to people in that industry and try to find out what works and what doesn't work. But of course, he was going to put his own spin on whatever he did, and he rarely did not go into something that he decided he wanted to do, but he was willing to change it as he learned what would make it more successful.
Mike, at this point in the show, again, we want our audience to know if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, but the main person today is Mike Goldsby. He's our guest. He's the author of a book called ENTREPRENEURSHIP The Disney Way, and he has the wonderful job of teaching college students about Disney, and he gets to take field trips to go to Disney World, and he calls it work, but we think he's got a little racket going there. And Mike, can you tell us, if people want to know more about this, where can we get the book, and is there a website where we can get more information?
There is. So you can find the book on Amazon. It's easy to purchase there, and we have a website called elprofile.com. That's elprofile.com.
Easy enough to remember, and again, we'll ask you that one more time at the end of the show, so if our audience wants to get this, it's a fun read to learn about Disney. If you've ever gone to the parks, and if you haven't, you'd better get going there soon, but I can see it being a great field trip for many reasons, and of course the experience and what you get out of it. Now, in your book, you talk about the mission statement of Disney. What's so special about that?
Oh, it's very special. Disney really works very hard on the attention to detail, the little details, to make sure that everyone that goes there finds happiness. I mean, they're really about bringing happiness into people's lives. And before the show, you and I were talking, and I loved a phrase that you said, that when you went there, you had more fun in less time. And in fact, they have 4 keys that drive every decision in the company, and that is that they look at safety, they look at courtesy, they look at the show, and they want to be efficient. And when you say more fun in less time, it's really all 4 of those things that make that happen. And they are very, very disciplined about making sure those are always met.
And I will tell you, and anybody who's been there, I think, would say probably the same thing. It's very hard to find any negatives. In fact, as a person who handles a success show, I come out thinking, my God, isn't this great? A simple thing, and I'm sure they're not the first ones, but to put a bracelet on. So I put the bracelet on. If I want to get in my door, I just flash the bracelet, I get in. If I want to pay for a snack by the pool, a Coke, a root beer, a hot dog, anything, I can just flash that. Number one, it's easier for me. I'm not running around, and I don't have kids with me at this point in life. But if I did, you're watching the kids, you're trying to find your wallet, you're making sure someone doesn't fall in the pool. It makes it so easy, and it makes it more fun, and it's more relaxing. So when you have a 7-day vacation, it's really like 10, because you're getting what a vacation really should be at Disney World. And I haven't experienced the other parks. I guess you have, but I think they're definitely doing something right. And even to the point where if you're spending money, I find you don't mind it as much because you are getting value for your dollar. People are having a lot of fun. It's very clean. It's very safe. And all the points you just mentioned. What's your favorite point of a visit to Disney World?
My favorite point, for me, it's simply walking around the parks and taking it in. I mean, so I've written these books. I've gotten to know some of the executives. I've gotten to know a lot of the people that work there. And so I have this appreciation for what goes into it. And I just love to walk the parks and think about all the hard work and all the thought, and also all the investment, all the risk that they were willing to take to just try to make that experience better. They never stop moving forward, and I get inspired. I truly get inspired. I'll find spots in the park that I love to sit down in. I take notes on my own projects. So it's just being in that environment of just such a high attention to excellence. You know, it's so rare to find that in this world where, as you said, the people working there are so courteous to you, and they're thinking of all those things. And so for me, that's it. It's just being in that environment, interacting with people, and just looking at the beauty of the design and construction of it.
I'm just thinking even of a new angle for you someday, that any business that really wants to grow and be better, and also maybe give a little perk to their employees, send them to Disney World, and then let them sit with someone like yourself, or maybe through a video chat or something, and say, what makes this such a special place? Why did you like it? And how can you incorporate that in your business? Boy, if we could all go to a restaurant and feel as good as we do when we come out of Disney World, and except for being tired because we're walking 18 hours during that day, but just all the how clean it is. When I was there once, a lady was walking out of one of the sweet shops, and she had one of these big mocha coffees, like a Starbucks, and she dropped it. And she looked like, after waiting online and everything, she dropped the coffee. And then I just sat back and watched. And a lady came out of the store who noticed that. One of the workers ran after her and said, "Come on back, we'll give you another one." And I thought that was so nice. And that, you know, I mean, what does it cost? $4.50 or something like that. But to me, that made the whole trip, because you felt this is a quality place. They're standing behind it. They want everybody to have a good time, and they'll go out of the way for you.
That's right. It's a great observation. And in fact, what they call those is magic moments. They give the employees, the cast members, they give them the liberty to act when they see something like that and do what they need to do to make sure that each interaction they have, they can make it better for that person that they do. And you know what's really neat about that is that when Disney gets letters about the experiences, or they survey customers about how their experience went, the number one thing they actually talk about isn't the rides, it's those cast members doing something like you just described with that mocha coffee.
I think we're also used to getting abused, or someone who won't do the slightest thing for us, or when you ask for an extra glass of water, they look at you and like, you really want an extra glass of water for free? You know, in a typical store or restaurant. And when you go to Disney World, the way you're treated, and it's credit to Walt, the people there, and to people like yourself who observe that and are trying to spread it to other students. All I can say is I'm jealous of you for your job, and if you ever don't want that job anymore, I'll be glad to put my resume in, and I'd also like to be one of your students and have some fun there. So keep up the good work. I guess that's the motto for today's show, and I wish this show could last about 2 hours longer. Mike Goldsby, again, we want our audience to know that you've been listening to author Mike Goldsby. His book is Entrepreneurship the Disney Way. The website real quick?
elprofile.com.
And if you want to know how Walt Disney does it, if you want to have such a good time, pick up a copy of Mike's book. Mike, thanks for being with us. I'd like to remind our audience that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next time when we'll continue our journey to success.